Sunday the 23rd. This evening I met a hitchhiker from Los Angeles going home from New York. He has been away 2 weeks and spent 5 days in Cheyenne, Wyoming, waiting for the snow to melt. He is a carefree person, wandering all over the country, almost penniless, working for his bed every night at the YMCA in the town he happens to land in. He gave me some very useful pointers on hitchhiking technique. I ought to be at Los Angeles in 2 weeks at the very most. Tomorrow it will probably be Santa Fe. It's a great game, this wandering. Monday the 24th. Santa Fe tonight. What an error. I forgot Kipling's favorite proverb. He travels fastest who travels alone. But I am putting the trunk rock before the radiator cap. I did not get to bed until 2 o'clock this morning, for talking to the vagabond I met last night. He came to borrow a match and stayed. There was another young fellow in with us, and the three of us talked well into the morning. On waking, I packed and stored all the belongings of mine which would not go on my back. Then I went out and had a fair-sized breakfast, and then returned to the Y to wait for Leo, my traveling companion, and my mail. Leo arrived, and so did a letter from Mother. I was expecting money, but none came. I told the desk clerk to forward mail today and tomorrow to the YMCA Santa Fe. At last we found ourselves out on the road, and we kept finding ourselves there for some time. At last we did get a ride, in a rumble seat on the back of a car going at a considerable rate of speed. Out of Pueblo, which is as far as the rumble seat went, we had to wait 2 hours. Finally we separated, and I got a truck into Walsenburg, a little town with very little, if any, reason for its existence. It was notable only for the number of Mexicans it contained. The children, little girls particularly, are very attractive, with little, serious brown faces under curly black hair. The Mexican people are very friendly. It took almost 2 hours to get a ride out of Walsenburg. I met up with Leo again soon before we got the lift. It was in the back of a truck, and it took us right into Trinidad, leaving my hat behind. We got a room in a third-rate hotel for 50 cents. It was a very poor room, but it was reasonably clean and certainly quite cheap. Tuesday the 25th. After a breakfast of pancakes and coffee, we started out again. Before very long, we got a ride in a truck, which took us over the Raton, pronounced Raton Pass, on the route of the old Santa Fe Trail to Raton, New Mexico. Out of Raton, we waited for 3 hours and then got a lift to Springer. From Springer, we walked and walked and walked. We got 2 short lifts, and then we walked until 9:30 in the evening, at which hour we flagged a truck into Wagon Mound. We arrived there with exactly 68 cents between us. The only reasonable accommodation which afforded itself was a cabin in a tourist camp, but the price was 75 cents. We had had only a box of raisins between us for lunch, so we decided that we should eat anyway. So we invested 10 cents in buns. By this time, the big boss of the tourist camp decided to take the 58 cents and pay up the balance himself. The young chap who gave us our cabin said, "Too bad, boss he stay. He go sooner, you sleep with me, and save you 50 cents. Too bad." When he came back with some firewood, he said, "You get beer up Colorado, yes?" "No, I no like beer. I got bottle of whiskey. When boss go, we drink, just for luck." He seemed rather disappointed when we refused. These Mexicans are really hospitable people. Wednesday the 26th. We spent a very comfortable night and got away early, away to the end of the town. A good bunch of cars passed us, so we separated. Leo walked on and I sat tight. Within half an hour, I got a lift with a cattle trader. There were 2 other hitchhikers in the car, and the back seat was missing. The combined baggage made things rather complex, but I managed to get a seat. There was no room for Leo, so we had to pass him up. We were a merry company, though silent at times. The man beside me, in where the back seat should have been, was a rancher in summer and a door-to-door salesman in winter, returning to his sister's ranch in Durango. The other hitchhiker was headed for Albuquerque, where a job as a mechanic was waiting for him. This ride took us all to Las Vegas, where the boss had to telephone. We waited very impatiently for the result of his call. He said that he might, if he could not get in touch with his man, go west to Santa Fe, which suited me perfectly, and south to Albuquerque, which suited the mechanic, and Las Lunas, which suited the rancher. At last, after a long delay, during which we did everything but pray for a bad connection, he came back to the car and said that his man had left that part of the country. We were quite pleased. Now I was away to Santa Fe. At Las Vegas, we left the plains and struck through the foothills of the San Cristo Range. The country was very beautiful, with odd-shaped hills and ridges of a bright red color, dotted with very green scrub, pinyon pines, and dry grass. Santa Fe was in a sort of broken cup, with plains to the south and hills on the other 3 sides. It is very well hidden. When we came upon the sign, Santa Fe City Limits, there was only 2 houses in sight. We had to climb a little hill before it came in sight. What a funny little town Santa Fe is. It seems to be part of the continent as old as the hills themselves. The streets are hardly wide enough for 2 cars to pass, and they wind and twist between adobe shacks and stores. The attractive Mexican children play on the sidewalks, where there are such luxuries, or sit on the doorstep talking, or run after each other along the courts or plazas. The population is largely Mexican and Roman Catholic. There are a few thousand white people, Americans as they are called by the others, who live in houses and streets that were laid out. The other streets just happened. The man who drove us in supplied us with a little lunch and then drove on with the other 2, leaving me to look for the Y, where my mail was to be sent, for a day or 2. But there is no YMCA in the capital of New Mexico. I went to a general delivery at the post office, but could not find any mail for me, and I was without a cent. I decided that I would have to have some money. My appetite told me that. So I went to the Western Union Telegraph office and sent home for some money, borrowing a nickel to allow me to do it. After waiting for 2 hours around the post office for Leo, who was supposed to meet me there, I went back to the telegraph office and got $15. It sounds very simple, but it almost made me homesick. I could almost see Mother get my wire and read it, and then gather her army together and pick out someone to send me some money from the Canadian National Office. I could see but felt myself slipping, so I started looking at the scenery and think about other more important things. I spent most of the afternoon in or around the post office, waiting for Leo, who did not turn up. Thursday the 27th. I hung around the post office for a long time this morning for Leo, who did not turn up. Poor fellow, he would have a hard time of it. He is dead broke. I am not badly off today. I got away at 9:30. Very late for a long-distance hitchhiker. The walk out of town is not a short one. It twists and writhes out of the center of town and winds painfully through a maze of gas stations and adobe houses. However, before I got to the end of town, a Spaniard driving a Chevrolet sedan stopped and picked me up. He said, "I don't usually pick hitchhikers up, but you looked honest. You took me right into Albuquerque." Halfway there, he picked up a full-blooded Indian, all dolled up in deerskin moccasins, red blanket, long black hair, and lots of silver and turquoise. He spoke English and Spanish very well. Albuquerque is a very attractive town. The Rio Grande flows through it, and irrigation has made it a green, wooded country with lots of fruit trees and melon and grapevines. The fruit has all been killed by a late frost. Out of Albuquerque, I got a ride to Los Lunas, about 20 miles, in a rickety old Ford driven by a happy Mexican. He was very pleasant and quite willing to give me information. Los Lunas, in contrast to the country I had just come through, is a desert town. A mile or two out of town, where I waited for my ride, I could see very little except hills and sand and yucca. That is all I had to expect for 150 miles, and it was well on into the afternoon. I was being an optimist. I got my ride, and a very interesting one. It was in the trailer of a heavy transport bound for somewhere south of Gallup, my destination for the night. They had to go through the town, and was all right. Well, out in the desert, the truck stopped and picked up two girls who were also bound for Los Angeles. They were a couple of hitchhikers who had come from Omaha, Nebraska, in the same time it took me to come from Colorado Springs. They averaged 400 miles a day. Farther on still, we picked up an old man bound for the same spot. We reached Gallup at midnight. Friday the 28th. This morning, I took my trip in little bits. I rode 15 miles in an army truck with a very silent Indian. Then over the Arizona border with an overcautious driver in a dilapidated touring car in a hailstorm. Next, I went a few miles to a place called Sanders with a truckload of asphalt. Here I invaded an Indian trading post and came away with a box of biscuits. Here I found a whole flock of real Indians. The woman carrying papooses, all dressed in brightly colored blankets. They were very amusing with their slow way of doing things. My next ride was a long and fast one, but I waited a long time for it. It took me right into Holbrook, so fast that it tore the side cushions off. We went right past the petrified forest and the painted desert without much of a glimpse of either. Out of Holbrook, I got a very slow-moving truck for 2 miles, then a fast ride into Winslow. By this time, it was getting late and cold, but I pushed on just the same. I got a ride with a cowboy who swore blue murder and whose car worked only sometimes. He left me in the middle of a very lonely prairie, with the sun coming down fast. I walked for 2 miles and got a lift in the back of an open truck. It took me almost to Winslow, which consisted of almost nothing. When I got off, a man about 40 years old got off with me, and together we looked for some place to stay. He was really broke. He found a tourist camp, but they would not give us anything. We bought a loaf of bread and a can of beans and set out to look for a camping spot. It was getting really cold and there was not much light, but we found a little spot behind the clump of spruces. And there we built a fire, cooked our beans, and ate them with the bread, and curled up to sleep in my blanket. Saturday, the 29th, April. That was some night. We had to get up every hour to feed the fire, or move part of it over to where it would do more good. Finally, the dawn came, and with it came snow. We spent our last dime. I figured that I would learn more being broke on a loaf of bread. With this in our hands, we made for a section house on the railway, where we asked for a cup of coffee. The section houses down here are inhabited by Mexican laborers and their families. We got our coffee, 2 cups each, and a large plate of tortillas and a plate of potatoes. Tortillas are flat cakes about the size of a dinner plate and very thin. They are made of flour and salt, baked on the top of the stove. They taste very good. We rode into Flagstaff, 17 miles, on the back of a truck in a sleet storm. It took us an hour to get warmed up in the hotel in the local pool hall, but after that we got a ride that took us to Wickenburg, 150 miles away and in a warm climate. It was with a traveling salesman, and how he did travel. We stopped in Prescott for our meal and managed to pick up a loaf of bread. In Wickenburg, while we were looking around for a place to camp, we ran into an old friend of my traveling companion. They used to punch cows together. The old man's name was Henry Hunt, and he was hunting for gold. He had an extra tent, so we used it for the night. My buddy's name is Dan Hampton of Los Angeles, an ice cream vendor when he is at home, and a high-class bum when he is away. He is about 41 years old and has one son and one daughter. His whole story is too big to put down here. It is a very grim tale of struggle against all sorts of odds. In Wickenburg, also I saw my first palm trees and my first cacti. Sunday the 30th. Traffic was poor today, so we decided to walk on out over the desert, but there was no place to stay. First we got a loaf of bread from a store, free, and then got 2 cups of coffee and a plate of tortillas and beans at a section house. After amusing the Mexican children for a little while, we set out. The sun was blazing down, and after a few miles, we were very dry. The desert is a wonderful place. There are only the cactus and a fairly high bush, and the hills way off in the distance to relieve the severity of the landscape. But even then it is not bad. There are all sorts of cacti: barrel cactus, flat cactus, tree cactus, and many others. The barrel cactus will yield water if properly cut, and if you want to wait long enough. We walked 20 miles before we got a ride. This too was on the back of a truck. At the California border, we learned that it was going right through to Los Angeles. At Blythe, the driver stopped and gave us a hamburger sandwich and coffee, and we were all set for the night. Of course, the back of a truck going over a bumpy road is hard, but one gets used to that. Monday, May the 1st. We got in at 2 o'clock this morning and spent the rest of the night in the Lincoln Heights police station. When the day dawned, we set out again and walked together to the middle of town, where Dan got a room in a hotel and went to get his pushcart, and I headed for the Y. The trip was over, and here I found myself in Los Angeles exactly 1 week after I left Colorado Springs. Saturday, the 13th. I got the assurance of a ride into Colorado Springs if I could be ready by 4 o'clock. I told them that I could be ready in half an hour. I was really anxious to get away from Los Angeles. My ride turned up at 4:30. The car was an old Lincoln, 7-passenger sedan. The company was as follows. There were 2 drivers, a middle-aged lady bound for Santa Fe, a young woman and her 9-year-old daughter bound for Indianapolis, a girl of about 25 bound for Oklahoma City, a one-legged man of 35 bound for Tucson on his way to Russia, and me. It was 6 o'clock before we got out of Los Angeles, and about 9 before we got through San Bernardino. From there, we got out 40 miles, and then, on a hill, we stalled. About 3 miles away, there was a garage where they did not know anything and got fixed up, so we thought. Away we sped, the little girl asleep on my lap and everyone more or less silent. The spasm took us about 10 miles further, and then the car stopped dead. We shoved the car around so it was headed the right way, and a Jew came along in a little coupe and shoved us into San Bernardino. It took an hour to get the bus in running order again. Sunday the 14th. The sun rose this morning over the most desolate country I have ever seen. It goes by the name of the Mojave Desert. There are no cactuses to lend variety to the view, but only the hills, mountains, and buttes in the distance, and the plains covered sparsely with dry weeds. At Needles, California, the scenery changed for a little while. We had come down from the Sacramento Mountains into the foothills of the Mojave Range. Down below us was the Colorado River, and beyond it were the low hills of the Arizona Desert. The North Arizona Desert is a real one, with less grass than ever and more flat country. The hills were interesting in some places. In fact, they always are if you are within 30 or 40 miles of them. By this time, I was beginning to get to know the company fairly well. The lame man seems to be a lot younger than he says he is. He has spent a lot of his time hoboing all over the country. He claims to be able to catch a freight on the run, and I believe it. He can move his one crutch and one leg like nothing I have ever seen before. The lady bound for Santa Fe was a very well-educated person, going to see the graduation of her son and daughter from a school near Teos. I got along very well with her. The old car stalled on a hill 4 miles outside of Williams. We managed to get it shoved into a garage at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and we did not get out until midnight. The vacuum tank had to be replaced, the timer adjusted, the spark plugs cleaned, the points adjusted, and the windshield polished. But we did get away after 2 false starts. Monday the 15th. We had breakfast at 10 a.m. in Gallup, New Mexico, and by 8 in the evening we were eating our next meal in Los Lunas, only 150 miles away. First, though, earlier in the morning, a box of personal effects belonging to the woman traveling with her daughter was found to be missing. It had contained a very remarkable doll belonging to the little girl and about which we had been hearing since we left Los Angeles. When she learned that her dolly had gone, one lone tear rolled down the child's cheek, and then she smiled. Her mother swore worse than any man could think of swearing in that company, and she cried and raised an awful howl. Well, past Gallup, out in the middle of the desert, a tire sprung a leak. It proved to be a worthless piece of rubber and was thrown away, and the spare put on in place. By this time, the other tire on the same side sprung a leak. It was repaired, and the valve went bad. Then the valve on the other tire went bad. One of the men started out for Los Lunas. He got a ride in, but had a terrible time getting back. He finally did arrive about 5 hours after he left. He had a few new valves, and a reamer, and a valve cap. With these and a borrowed pump, we got our car in condition to get into town, and we were hungry. We had the car fixed up a little there, and then set out for Albuquerque. By midnight, I had bunked up in a hotel after having a hot bath. The first real sleep this was since Saturday morning. Tuesday, the 16th. They got us up at 7:30 this morning, and it was an awful job to get out of that bed. At 10 o'clock, I left the old bunch and headed for Denver in another car. It was a Chrysler, and there were 3 other men in it, including the driver. The trip was quite uneventful. At Rattoon, we gave a ride to a girl who was hitchhiking to Kansas. She was lugging a hat box, almost as large as she was, about twice as heavy. She was quite attractive and intelligent looking, and was probably 17. Wednesday, the 17th. At 1:30 this morning, I landed at Colorado Springs Y, got my mail, and pulled out for Denver. By 4, I was getting to sleep in the Denver Y. Monday the 29th. I spent the morning packing and talking to Charles Hendy. At 2 in the afternoon, I was called for and taken to the bus station. The bus was not very uncomfortable, but quite crowded. I managed to get a fairly comfortable seat in the corner and got quite well settled before the bus pulled out. As long as the light lasted, I could see only flat, bare country, unbroken by trees, hills, or valleys. How glad I am that I don't have to live here. Yet this evening I met a man, well into middle age, who had never seen anything else. Tuesday the 30th. I woke up in a new country. It was hilly and green and covered with trees and grain fields. We reached Kansas City by noon, and we were out again in half an hour. All afternoon we traveled over country which was very much like my own. I was feeling more at home every minute. I even saw a few lilacs. Up to Kansas City, and almost as far as St. Louis, I noticed that there were a great number of Negroes working in the fields. St. Louis was reached at night, giving me time to shave before leaving for Chicago. Wednesday the 31st. I registered at the Palmer House and sent a note to Cousin Margaret and set out to see the fair. Hey everybody, it's Steve Welch. Thanks for checking out the documentary. My great uncle Ruthven McNairn, this 4-month amazing journey in 1933. It was really fun making the movie, but it took me a while to figure out a lot of the things and get the context. So I've written a book in partnership with my great uncle Ruthven. I wrote the introduction and footnotes to give context to the diary, the people, places, and things that he saw along the way, and give a little color to the era, 1933. So check that out. If you purchase an ebook, certainly helps the channel, and I'm a completely independent filmmaker, and it's a great value. It's some great insight. So yeah, check out the website, stevewelchontario.com. Links to all my films and music. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free download of my latest album, Songs to Save Your Life. So check it out. Thanks for the support. Thanks for your interest. I would love to see comments. How did the movie strike you? What resonated with you? Comments are welcome. Peace out.
Oh, the clouds want to roll away. Oh, the clouds want to roll away. Now I don't care how hard it rains, 'cause the clouds want to roll away.